Corazon Del Crimen. Crime and Rhyme is the second installment in the gripping novel series that offers a close look at the criminal underworld and its close correlation to hip-hop. This book delves deep into the life of Carlito Nene, showing his good and bad deeds, his ups and downs, and how he navigates the gritty streets of New York City. Through the intertwined themes of crime and rhyme, we explore the lives of those involved in the underworld, their struggles and their successes, and how music plays a crucial role in their lives. The book takes you on a thrilling ride, showing the raw truth of the streets and nothing less. It references the novel Risk Takers on Skull Island, adding more depth and complexity to the storyline. Get ready for a heart-pumping, page-turning experience with Corazon Del Crimen, Crime and Rhyme. As the early morning light began to filter through the city, New York City started to come to life. Carlito Nene, notorious gangster and head of one of the city's most dangerous criminal organizations, sat in his penthouse apartment, overlooking the skyline. He was always up early, taking in the stillness of the city before the chaos of the day began. Down on the streets, the city was already bustling with activity. A mother rushed out of her apartment, grateful for another day with her family. She made her way to the local bakery, picking up fresh bread and pastries for breakfast. Meanwhile, a grumpy commuter made his way to the subway station, cursing under his breath at the slow-moving train. He wished he could be like the entitled CEO he had heard so much about, with all the luxuries of life at his fingertips. A drug addict stumbled out of a rundown apartment building, thankful for the high he had just received from his dealer. He knew it wouldn't last long, but it was enough to get him through the day. As the morning progressed, the contrasts became more apparent. The self-loathing artist emerged from his studio feeling miserable about his latest project. He longed for the success and wealth of the ungrateful millionaire, but he couldn't seem to catch a break. The rebellious teen slept in, ignoring the responsibilities of school and home. He dreamed of being a famous rock star, but he didn't know how to make it happen. The cynical journalist scoured the city for negative stories, twisting the truth to fit their own agenda. They longed for the purity and positivity of the religious preacher who walked the streets, spreading hope and love. The bitter divorcee walked the city streets, consumed with hatred for their ex-spouse. They couldn't see past their own pain to appreciate the beauty of the city around them. Finally, the hateful troll sat behind their computer screen, spreading negativity and hate to anyone who crossed their path. They longed for the happiness and fulfillment of the drug addict who stumbled down the street, their high keeping them from the pain of reality. As the sun rose higher in the sky, the city came to life, each person living their own unique story. Carlito Nene looked out over the city, seeing both the good and the bad, the blessed and the unappreciative. He knew that in his world it was easy to get lost in the darkness. He actually preferred the darkness. Carlito Nene's dancing. The beat of the music pulsates through the rooftop, and the lyrics of the message fill the air. As Carlito Nene dances, he moves to the rhythm of the song, his body swaying to the beat. The words of the message appear in bold letters on the screen. Don't push me, 'cause I'm close to the edge, I'm trying not to lose. My head, it's like a jungle sometimes, it makes me wonder how I keep from going under. As Carlito Nene continues to dance, his movements become more and more intricate. He spins, twirls, and bounces to the beat, his body flowing with the music. But as the camera pans out, we see a different scene unfolding in the background. 3 of Carlito Nene's goons are viciously attacking a man by a pigeon coop nearby. It was Carlos's grandfather's pigeon coop, to be exact. The man screams in pain, but his cries are drowned out by the sound of the music and Carlito Nene's dancing. Despite the violence happening just a few feet away, Carlito Nene remains oblivious, lost in his own world of hip-hop and dance. For him, this rooftop is a sanctuary, a place where he can forget about his criminal lifestyle and just be himself. But as the music comes to an end, the reality of his situation comes crashing down. He knows that he can never truly escape his past, and that the violence and danger will always be a part of his life. As the last notes of the song fade away, Carlito Nene takes a deep breath and looks out at the city skyline once more. He knows that he must stay vigilant, always watching his back and never letting his guard down. But for now, he will savor this moment of freedom, this moment of pure joy and self-expression on the rooftop. with nothing but the music and his dance to keep him company. Carlito Nene turns around and looks at Jeff laying on the rooftop, his eyes landing on his goons who are still mercilessly beating Jeff. His heart smiles as he sees the state of the young man. Jeff has lost weight, his body battered and bruised from the torture he's endured at the hands of Carlito's crew. Without hesitation, Carlito squats down to get a closer look at Jeff, his eyes filled with fake concern. He speaks softly, his voice carrying the weight of his authority. "Jeff, go home and get cleaned up. Tell your father that I saved you and that he owes me a favor. If it weren't for me, you would be dead right now." As Jeff stumbles to his feet, Carlito's gaze follows him, a mix of regret and pride on his face. He knows that he's done wrong, but he also knows that he's the only one who can protect Jeff and his family from the dangers that lurk in the shadows, and what lurked in the shadows was Carlito Nene. As Jeff stumbles away, Carlito watches him go, his heart heavy with the weight of his actions. He knows that he's just used Jeff as a pawn in his own game of power and control, but he also knows that he's done what he had to do to survive. As he watches Jeff disappear into the distance, Carlito turns to face his goons. He knows that he must be strong, that he must show no weakness in front of them. He stands tall, his eyes locked on theirs, his voice ringing out with the power of his authority. "You have done well, my friends," he says, his words filled with a sense of pride and satisfaction. "But remember this, if you ever cross me, you will pay with your lives." The goons nod their heads in agreement, their faces a mixture of fear and respect. They know that Carlito Nene is not to be trifled with, that he is a force to be reckoned with in the world of New York's criminal underworld. As Carlito turns to walk away, his mind races with thoughts of the future. He knows that he is on the up and coming, that he is destined to become one of the most notorious gangsters of his time. And with each passing day, he draws closer to his goal, his eyes fixed firmly on the prize that awaits him. As they enter the elevator, they see a small black American boy with a mean look in his eyes waiting to go down. The elevator doors close, and the elevator starts to descend. The kid shoots a glare at the bodyguards, and Carlito smirks. The kid notices Carlito's jewelry and asks how he got all the gold rings and chains. Carlito responds by saying, "I'm a very important person." The kid smartly replies, "That's not what I asked you." Carlito snaps back, "I got it from killing people." The kid's eyes widen and he says, "Oh shit, I killed somebody and didn't get anything. You should let me work for you, Biggie Smalls." Carlito laughs at the kid's audacity and tries to brush him off. But the kid's persistence catches him off guard, and he starts to wonder if this kid could be useful in the future. The elevator reaches another floor, and the doors open to reveal a group of men waiting to get in. The kid pulls out a gun and everyone backs up. The doors close and the elevator continues to descend. The goons are surprised by the kid's quick thinking, and Carlito can't help but smile at the potential he sees in the boy. Chapter Ang, the Prodigy. Carlito, his goons, and the African-American kid stepped out of the elevator and out of the apartment building. As they walked out onto the street, the kid looked up at Carlito and said, "So, Fat Joe, are you going to let me be down with your terror squad?" Carlito smirked and replied, "You just can't leave with me, man. I'm not your father, and I'm not a kidnapper or a pedophile, so go home." The kid explained to Carlito that he didn't have a home, but he could ask his mother because she was across the street. Carlito took the kid's hand and led him over to the woman who was strung out on crack and other heavy drugs. Carlito knew the woman for hanging around that street, but he never knew she had a son. By the looks of it, the kid had been surviving on his own, and he was probably taking care of his mother. When Carlito met the kid's mother, it touched him deeply. He grew up in a house with drugs as well, so he immediately bonded with the kid. He saw something special in the boy, someone who could survive under those circumstances and still be educated, smart, courageous, and brave enough to have a conversation with the legendary Carlito Nene. The crackhead woman started to scream at the kid. "What have you done? What have you done to this man? I'm sorry, sir. Whatever he's done, I'm sorry. He's a bad kid." Without even asking the woman if this was her child, Carlito realized that this was exactly what the kid had said. He immediately knew that this kid would be in a better situation with him. Carlito gave her maybe about $6,000 or $7,000, the walking money he had in his pocket, and told her that her son was going with him. He promised to bring him back periodically to check on her. As the limousine pulled up, Carlito, the goons, and the new prodigy stepped inside the bulletproof car. Carlito knew that giving the woman that much money was a death sentence, and she would probably be dead by tonight because of it. But he had no other choice. He couldn't leave the boy on the street with a crackhead mother. In the car, there were no words spoken. Carlito was lost in thought, thinking about the boy and the situation he was in. He felt a deep sense of compassion for the child and a responsibility to take care of him. As the car pulled away from the curb, Carlito knew that he had just taken on a new protege, a prodigy who would one day become a legend in his own right. The playground of the rich and reckless, a day in the life of Tommy. As soon as you step into Tommy's mansion, you can feel the luxurious lifestyle that he lives. The kitchen is a chef's dream, with stainless steel appliances, granite countertops, and an array of cooking utensils. The Italian woman, with her tattoos and curvy figure, effortlessly moves around the kitchen, creating the most exquisite drinks. The crystal glasses shimmer as she pours the Prosecco into them, and the ice clinks as she places them on the counter. Tommy's bedroom is a sight to behold. The enormous California king-size bed dominates the room, with its special frame that Tommy had designed to fit 2 mattresses together. The sheets are a silky white, and the pillows are plump and inviting. As you gaze at the bed, you notice 3 women sleeping beside Tommy, 2 African-American women, and a blonde bombshell. They all look so drained, and you can't help but wonder how lucky this guy is. Tommy is a man who enjoys the finer things in life. He's a playboy, and his pockets seem to have no end. The party at his mansion never stops, and people come and go like they're on a carousel. His friends who have successful careers have been known to stay for weeks or even months at a time, and they become part of Tommy's entourage. Tommy walks through the French doors to his backyard, and the scene is like something out of a movie. His friends are lounging in the pool, drinks in hand, and laughter fills the air. As Tommy makes his way to the pier, he greets everyone like he's the president. Someone gives him a blunt of kush. He jumps on his speedboat and the party continues out on the water. Tommy's high lifestyle is something that most people can only dream of. He's untouchable, thanks to his connection to Carlito Nene. For the last 25 years, he's lived a life that most people can only imagine. His parties are legendary, and the people who attend them feel like they're part of something special. The party never stops, and the people never leave. Tommy's mansion is a place where anything can happen, and everything usually does. Speed bumps and sharp turns. Tommy leaves with his chest puffed out and his Hawaiian house robe blowing in the wind. The speedboat is filled with topless women and partygoers who are all nursing hangovers from the previous night's festivities. Tommy is probably the only one who is somewhat sober, though he just woke up to a drink. As the 2 women walk over to him and offer him a bump, Tommy takes one from her brand-new boobs. As the cocaine dissolves in his nose, it hits his brain, sending him into a flashback. He drifts off into his memories, not paying attention to anything else around him. Tommy recalls his teenage years when he started selling a little crack. Though he made a name for himself, he never earned enough to cover his bills. He started hanging out with shady characters who were in the same boat as him, hustling but never making enough to buy a half a key or a quarter key. They could barely afford an ounce or 2. These guys were shooting bad, buying 8 balls and selling that, and then buying weed with the rest. It was a cycle that never ended. Tommy's vision goes to that day of the bank robbery. He and his accomplices were in the process of robbing the bank when he accidentally shot the teller who was giving up all the money. They could have probably gotten away with it, but Tommy was so nervous that he shot the guy point blank. They snatched up what money they could and left. To say the least, he screwed up. But as soon as he jumped in the car, the guys were so stoked they were like, "Hell yeah, Tommy a shooter." Tommy knew accepting the badge of honor that the guys were going to give him would protect them later in the streets and later in life. It did. Tommy was known as a killer at this point, and this marked the start of his rocky road to success. Suddenly, Tommy snaps out of his flashback as he swerves the boat, barely missing 2 people who were jet skiing close to the boat. The boat was probably close to them in his little vision for the last 2 minutes. Tommy screams into the air and shouts, "El mundo es mío," something he learned from Carlito. "The world is mine." The scene ends with Tommy taking another bump from the girl's boobs, grabbing a handful of ass. Then joining the ladies in a three-way kiss, but all they could taste was the cocaine. Cocaine and schematics. Tommy leaned back against the captain's chair, a smug grin on his face as he bored his friends and entourage with the schematics of the boat. "This baby's a Tesla prototype," he boasted, "and I'm about to open her up and see what she can really do." His partygoers desperately tried to take a bump of cocaine, but Tommy was too focused on the boat. He couldn't risk losing control, not when there were so many high-profile gadgets to navigate. As the boat surged forward, leaving a trail of white water in its wake, the guests clung to their seats, their minds too fried to fully appreciate the thrill of the ride. Suddenly, the sound of sirens shattered the air. Tommy's guests barely noticed, too lost in their own drug-induced haze. But Tommy knew what was happening. He was being pulled over. The police boat was close enough now for the officers to see what was going on, and they didn't like what they saw. Tommy's guests were all too aware of Tommy's power. Police knew better than to mess with anyone connected to Carlito Nene. The last officer who had tried to take on Tommy head-on had lost his job, and then his wife was killed 2 months after him, leaving the force. No one wanted to suffer the same fate. The officers called out to Tommy, telling him to slow down before he hurt someone or himself. Tommy just smiled at them, cocaine still under his nose, and waved. As he peeled off in the speedboat, the guests laughed, relieved that they had escaped unscathed. Tommy was mad that he didn't splash the police with water as he drove away, but he knew he had to be careful. There were always eyes on him, always someone waiting for him to slip up. Back at his mansion, Tommy's guests continued to party, snorting cocaine and taking shots of expensive liquor. Tommy watched them with a mixture of amusement and disgust. They were all so weak, so easily controlled by their addictions. He was different. He was a survivor, and he knew that the world was his for the taking. A tragic accident. Tommy and his entourage were still partying on the speedboat when they heard screams coming from the direction of Tommy's mansion. As they docked the boat and walked up the pier, the screams grew louder, and they realized that something was terribly wrong. As they ran towards the mansion, they saw a woman lying at the side of the pool, blue and lifeless. It was Kelly, the sister of Butter, the lead singer of Tommy's band, Bloody Scab. Tommy rushed to her side and tried to resuscitate her, but it was too late. Kelly had drowned. Tommy was devastated. Kelly was not just a member of the entourage, she was family. She was the voice of reason, the one who kept things grounded when everyone else was spiraling out of control. And now she was gone, just like that. As the partygoers panicked and dispersed, Tommy retreated into the house, screaming and cursing at the sky. He was inconsolable, his grief turning into anger and rage. But what Tommy and his entourage didn't know was that Kelly's death was no accident. Tanya, a secret super soldier and personal assassin of Sonia Escobar, had snuck into the party, disguised as a guest. She made her way to the pool, where she waited for the perfect opportunity to strike. Tanya was there to send a message to Carlito Nene, to let him know that no one was safe, and that she had eyes on everyone. Her mark was Kelly, and she executed the hit with ruthless efficiency. She pulled Kelly to the bottom of the pool, chopped her in the neck, and as Kelly gasped for air, Tanya pulled her even deeper down. The struggle for life continued every 5 or 6 feet, but in the end, Tanya emerged victorious. Tommy and his entourage were unaware of the true cause of Kelly's death, and their grief was overwhelming. As Tommy screamed into the air, he retreated back into the house and emerged with an AR-15. He fired off rounds into the air, yelling for anyone who wanted him to come get him. Some of the partygoers were shaken and ran away, but others were unfazed. They had seen Tommy like this before, and they knew that he needed time to process his emotions. They stayed behind to comfort him, to help him grieve, and to make sure that he didn't do anything foolish. Damn. I feel bad for Tommy standing there, his finger on the trigger, his heart full of pain and anger. What will happen next? Only time will tell. The deadly duo. Tommy sat in the security room, watching the live feed from the pool area. He took a swig from his expensive liquor bottle and then turned to the group behind him. They were all on edge, waiting for something to happen. Suddenly, they saw a woman close to Kelly in the water. She went under, and then Kelly was pulled under as well, like a horror movie. Bubbles were the only thing visible as they were both under the water. Seconds later, the woman emerged from the pool, yelling and causing a commotion. She grabbed a towel and ran through the mansion, escaping unnoticed. This was Tanya, the deadly assassin from Ecuador. Tanya was known for her deadly skills and was feared by many. She was like a venomous snake, stalking her prey before striking with deadly force. Her childhood in the poverty zone of Ecuador had taught her to survive by any means necessary. She had risen up through martial arts and military training to become one of the top assassins in the world. Her travels had led her to the United States, where she quickly became wealthy. But Tanya's rise to the top was not easy. She had faced many struggles and challenges along the way. She had fought against poverty, discrimination, and sexism to become the deadly assassin she was today. Her training had taught her to be patient, to strike at the right moment, and to always be one step ahead of her enemies. Tanya's journey had led her to Sonia Escobar, another powerful woman in the male-dominated underworld. They quickly bonded and became inseparable. Tanya saw the great benefits of linking up with Sonia and vice versa. They were like two dangerous elements combining together to form an even deadlier force. Sonia's name was already strong, but with Tanya by her side, it became even stronger. Tanya was the golden name that would forever be linked to Sonia's legacy. They were a deadly duo, and anyone who dared to cross them would pay the ultimate price. Together, they had taken down countless enemies, leaving a trail of 1,000 bodies behind them. They were a force to be reckoned with, and their bond was unbreakable. As the chapter ends, we see Tanya and Sonia together, planning their next move. They were a dangerous combination, but also a formidable one. They were like two sides of the same coin, complementing each other perfectly. Tanya reclined in her plush leather seat, sipping a glass of chilled champagne as the private jet soared above the clouds. Her black hair was perfectly styled, cascading in soft waves around her face. She had changed out of her designer swimsuit and into a sleek white pantsuit by Alexander McQueen, which hugged her curves in all the right places. Her blouse, a silk number by Valentino, was adorned with a delicate lace collar that framed her face. Diamonds sparkled around her neck, catching the light and sending prisms dancing across the cabin. The stones were set in a necklace by Harry Winston, a piece so exquisite that it was worth more than most people's houses. Her fingers were adorned with rings from Van Cleef and Arpels, each one a work of art in its own right. Tanya's feet were encased in a pair of sky-high Louboutin heels, their signature red soles glinting in the sunlight that streamed through the plane's windows. As she raised her glass to take another sip of champagne, she looked every inch the millionaire heiress that she was. But Tanya was no ordinary socialite. She was a cold-blooded killer, a deadly assassin who had amassed a fortune by taking out her rivals one by one. And now, as she gazed out at the endless expanse of blue sky, she was plotting her next move. She pulled out her phone and dialed a familiar number, her fingers tapping impatiently on the screen as she waited for the call to connect. Finally, the screen flickered to life, and she was greeted by the face of Sonia Escobar, her most trusted confidant. "Did you have fun at the beach?" Sonia asked, a mischievous twinkle in her eye. Tanya grinned. "I did, but I have business to attend to. I'll be back soon." Sonia nodded. "Be careful, mi amiga. You know how dangerous this world can be." Tanya shrugged. "I can handle myself, but thanks for the concern." As she ended the call, Tanya felt a surge of adrenaline. She was living life on the edge, and she loved every minute of it. Meanwhile, Tommy was seething with anger. He paced back and forth in his opulent mansion, his mind racing as he tried to make sense of the chaos that had erupted around him. His eyes were bloodshot, and a thin sheen of sweat covered his brow. He knew that he needed to act fast if he wanted to stay alive. He reached for the phone on his desk and dialed Carlito's number. The line crackled, and he could hear the sound of a car engine in the background. "Carlito, I need your help," Tommy said, his voice tight with emotion. "What's wrong, man?" Carlito asked, his tone concerned. Tommy took a deep breath. "Sonia killed Kelly, and I have footage of Tanya drowning her in my pool. I need permission to take her out." Carlito's voice was grave. "I'll make the call. But you know the rules, Tommy. This has to be sanctioned." Tommy nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that he was playing a dangerous game, but he had no choice. He was in too deep, and the only way out was to eliminate the threats to his power. As he hung up the phone, Tommy felt a wave of nausea wash over him. He knew that he was in over his head, and that the stakes were higher than ever before. But he was determined to survive, no matter the cost. As the black bulletproof limo continues to drive through the deserted streets of Carlito's territories, the sound of Jealous One's Envy by Fat Joe can be heard blasting through the speakers. The beat of the song pulses through the car, causing the windows to vibrate and the kid to bounce in his seat with excitement. Carlito Nene nods his head to the rhythm of the music, clearly enjoying the song. He turns to his goons and says, "You know, Fat Joe is from the Bronx, just like us. He knows what it's like to come up in these streets to fight for what's yours." The kid nods along, not quite sure who Fat Joe is, but sensing the importance of the moment. Carlito continues, "This song, Jealous One's Envy, is about exactly that. It's about how people will hate on you when you start to make something of yourself, when you start to get ahead. But you can't let that stop you. You gotta keep pushing forward." The limo stops at a red light and two cars pull up alongside them. Before anyone can react, the sound of gunshots fills the air. The kid's eyes widen with fear, but Carlito and his goons spring into action, ducking down and pulling out their own guns. The kid can hear the lyrics of Jealous One's Envy playing in the background as chaos erupts outside the car. "I'm from where the streets are darker than my skin, out of the depths of the underground, hell within. Jealous ones still envy, that's what my name mean." The gunfire finally stops, and the car pulls away from the scene unscathed thanks to its bulletproof exterior. Carlito Nene chuckles to himself, clearly enjoying the adrenaline rush. The kid can't help but feel a little excited too, despite the danger they just faced. As they continue to drive through the Bronx, the sound of Jealous One's Envy still playing, Carlito Nene continues to explain the song's meaning. "It's about how, when you're from the bottom, people don't want to see you succeed, but you gotta keep pushing, keep fighting, and never let the haters get to you." The kid nods along, understanding now the importance of the song and the message it carries. He starts to tap his foot to the beat, feeling like he's part of something bigger than himself. The limo pulls up to Carlito's hideout, and the kid can't help but feel a little disappointed that the ride is over. But as he steps out of the car and looks around at the empty streets, he knows that this is where he belongs, with Carlito Nene and his crew. As they disappear inside the building, the sound of Jealous One's Envy fades away, but the kid knows that the lessons he learned from the song will stay with him forever. Puerto Rican, Gangster Carlito Nene. "I'm running on a whole different thing than these old-time Italian bosses. This is 2023, and New York City's on some different stuff. The Italians don't run anything out here anymore. They own a couple of buildings, but as far as this trade, it's the black and the brown that control it, and that's just what it is. As for me having to call anybody, the only person I should be calling would be God. And me and God are on the best of terms right now, so there's no one I gotta call. That's just my little way of telling Tommy to chill out, and I'll make the arrangements." The kid smiles and says, "Good, 'cause I didn't want to have to fill out an application with your boss." As the gentlemen stand in the middle of the drug factory, one of Carlito's workers walks up to the group and greets them like soldiers, giving them handshakes and salutes. When he gets to the kid, he pats Kid on the top of his head. Kid immediately pulls a gun from out of his brand-new Dior Man purse and slides the gun right to the man's hip bone, pulling the trigger. Immediately, everyone is alerted, and there's a man down. All of Carlito's goons pull their guns on the man, making sure he cannot retaliate against Kid. Kid viciously looks at the man on the floor, bleeding, holding the side of his hip, and says, "I'm not a dog. Don't ever pat my head again. I'll chop your fingers off." Carlito Nene smiles, knowing that this is exactly who he needed. The kid probably doesn't even understand the big picture, and that's exactly what Carlito loved. The kid would try to focus on the big picture as he grew and got deeper into this gangster lifestyle, but at that time, Carlito would already be into the details. It was a philosophy he lived by. The devil is in the details. As the chaos settled, Carlito turned to the kid and said, "You see, kid, it's not about who's in charge or who's the boss. It's about understanding the game and playing your cards right. You gotta keep your eyes on the prize, and that's where I come in. I may not be the boss of bosses, but I know how to run a business, and that's what counts." The kid looked at Carlito with a newfound respect. He had always been a loose cannon, but now he understood that there was more to the game than just pulling the trigger. He had a lot to learn, but he was willing to learn from Carlito Nene. After all, he was the one who knew how to get things done, how to run a successful operation, and how to stay alive in the game. As they walked out of the drug factory, the kid couldn't help but think about what Carlito had said. He was right. The devil was in the details. If he was going to make it in this game, he had to pay attention to the little things, the details that could make or break a deal, a life, or a business. And he knew that with Carlito Nene as his mentor, he had a fighting chance in this crazy, dangerous world of organized crime. The Hummer rumbled down the streets of the Bronx, the sound of the engine reverberating off the surrounding buildings. Carlito Nene sat in the back seat with the kid and a few of his goons, their weapons at the ready in case of trouble. As they rolled past block after block of run-down buildings and corner bodegas, Carlito's phone rang. He answered without looking at the caller ID. "What's up?" he said gruffly. "Yo, Carlito, it's Monster. I'm in New York," came the voice on the other end. Carlito's eyes widened slightly. Monster was a dangerous man, one of the most notorious killers on Skull Island, and Carlito had hired him for a job a few months ago. "You got what I asked for?" Carlito asked, trying to keep his super steady. "Yeah, I got Elon Musk's blood relative right here with me," Monster replied. "I'm landing at JFK in 5 minutes." Carlito took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Good. Head to the stash house in Jersey. I'll meet you there tonight." Monster hesitated. "What about my payment?" Carlito smirked. He loved to play these games. "Payment just came through. You'll get your cut, don't worry." "All right," Monster said grudgingly. "See you tonight." The call ended and Carlito sat back in his seat, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He glanced at the kid who was staring out the window with a look of wonder on his face. "Something on your mind, kid?" Carlito asked, his voice low. The kid turned to him, his eyes wide with excitement. "That guy sounds crazy, Carlito. I want to be like him someday." Carlito chuckled. "Yeah, he's crazy, all right, but he gets the job done." The Hummer pulled up to a stoplight and Carlito instructed the driver to put on his favorite album. The next thing you heard was DMX's Hell is Hot blasting from the speakers, the dark beats and aggressive lyrics filling the car. As the Hummer rolled on through the streets, Carlito sat back, his mind racing with thoughts of the future. He had big plans for himself and his crew, and he knew that with the right moves, he could become the most powerful gangster in New York City. And with Monster's help, those plans were one step closer to becoming a reality. As the Hummer cruised through the bustling streets of New York, Carlito Nene and his crew were engrossed in a deep discussion. The young kid was still reeling from the fact that they were heading to church, and couldn't wrap his head around the idea of a gangster like Carlito being connected to a righteous woman like Sister Frances. Carlito could sense the kid's confusion, and he decided to delve into a deep psychological and spiritual conversation. He spoke about the delicate balance that exists in the world, between light and dark, good and evil. He explained that just like Sister Frances was doing her part to bring light and goodness into the world, he too was playing his part in the grand scheme of things. "The same money that I use to fund my business and operations comes back to the community through Sister Frances's church. It's a cycle, a balance that exists in the world. The darkness I bring is offset by the light she brings. It's just the way things are." The kid was still trying to grasp the concept, but Carlito's words were making sense to him. He realized that everything was connected, and that there was a reason for everything that happened in the world. As they approached the church, Carlito's demeanor changed. He instructed the driver to park the Hummer outside, and they all got out. Sister Frances was standing outside the church waiting for them. She was a small woman, with a kind face and gentle eyes. Carlito introduced the kid to her, and she smiled warmly, welcoming him to the church. Carlito handed Sister Frances a small envelope and whispered a few words to her. She nodded, and Carlito turned to the kid. Let's go. We've got business to attend to. As they walked away from the church, the kid couldn't help but feel a sense of peace and serenity. He realized that there was more to life than just the violence and chaos that he had known so far. And he knew that he had Carlito Nene to thank for showing him that there was a balance in the world, and that even the darkest of souls had a part to play in the grand scheme of things. As Carlito Nene leaves the church and heads to New Jersey, the story takes us to various characters who are busy living out their own daily routines. The cameras enter through the windows of a bakery, where it seems like an ordinary mom and pop shop. But as we go further behind the counter doors into the back, we see a woman in a baker's outfit with her apron bloody and a knife in her hand. Her face is distraught. This woman is Nicole the baker, and she has just mutilated one of her customers who came in the shop complaining about the cupcakes not being fluffy enough. Nicole invites her in the back to check out the operation, and she smiles at the camera with a sick, delusional look as if everything is all right. The camera shoots across town to a private location where General Roberti is torturing a man who has already confessed. The man has given General Roberti all the information he has, but being that General Roberti's English isn't so good, he continues to torture the man. The camera then shoots off in the next direction, leading us to Sonia Escobar's mansion where she's on the phone with Senor Jaime. He explains to Sonia Escobar that Fingers never made his flight. We flash back to the night when Sonia Escobar was informed that Fingers was leaving the Hard Rock Cafe in Hollywood, Florida. Senor Jaime and a few of his crew followed and tailed Fingers until he stepped out of his car headed towards his flight. Senor Jaime pulled up beside Fingers and his entourage, unleashing dozens of bullets that tore through them. Everyone was killed except for Fingers. He was rushed to Jackson Memorial Hospital in Miami and has been on life support ever since. Senor Jaime sent a couple of his goons to stake out the hospital to keep an eye on Fingers to make sure he doesn't get released or wake up from his coma. As soon as he does, they'll turn off his lights. Sonia is thrilled within your Senor Jaime and invites him to come to New York. As we zoom back to Carlito Nene and the crew riding to New Jersey to meet up with Monster, he can only wonder what all his ops are doing at this very moment. As we wrap up this chapter, we want to extend our gratitude to all of our listeners and readers for joining us on this thrilling journey through the heart of crime in New York City. We've witnessed the war between Sonia Escobar and Carlito Nene rage on, with the addition of a new player in the game, the Kid. And now, as we speak, Monster is landing in New York with Elon Musk's blood relative captive. The stakes have never been higher, and the ride ahead promises to be nothing short of exhilarating. So stay tuned, hit that subscribe button, and be ready for the next installment of Corazon Del Crimen, a heart-pumping novel of New York's top crocodiles. Only the strong will survive, and we invite you to join us for the ride of your life. Until next time, keep your eyes open, your mind sharp, and your heart racing. To be continued.